Welcome to How to Be a Dungeon Master. I'm here with a special guest, Matthew Ford, and a little bit about our wonderful guest. Matthew Ford started off with Dungeons and Dragons, just like the kids in Stranger Things, which so many of our audience has. Back in 1978, playing the version 1 Blue Box set, drinking Orange Crush Soda, one of my favorites, still one of my favorites. He has played and DM'd every edition since then and has loved them all. Matt is especially passionate about teaching D&D to absolute beginners and has sparked the love of D&D in hundreds of people who have become devoted players and dungeon masters, hence the reason why we are having him today on our show. Also, a little bit more about Matt, because I found this to be interesting. You're recently retired and dedicating all of your time now on Rolling Rogues, which is a nonprofit organization devoted to connecting people through tabletop gaming. You are doing the Lord's work, Matt. So welcome.
I try. Yeah, this is great. Thank you so much. I'm
Welcome
so thrilled.
to
I've been
Dragon
listening.
Talk.
Yeah, I've been listening to Dragon Talk forever, and it's just really one of my big life goals to be on here and spread the word about teaching absolute beginners, how fun it can be.
Well, that is something that I am excited about when I do get a little bit more experience as a dungeon master. I also want to share Dungeons and Dragons with absolute beginners and new players, because I do believe that playing Dungeons and Dragons can and will impact your life in such positive ways. And as we all know, you don't always get a second chance to make a first impression. And sometimes people's first impressions with D&D doesn't go that well for various reasons. And they either never find their way back, or they find their way back years and years later, and then they're angry that their first experience wasn't as good because they could have been playing this whole time.
How many times I've heard on Dragon Talk where people said, "Oh, I tried D&D once, I really didn't like the experience, and it was years before I tried." Now that's the people you're talking to. By definition, they came back to try it again. Right. There must be a lot of people who have that first bad experience that never come back, and my heart breaks with that. And so I really want to be everybody's first best DM and give them a little taste of every kind of D&D experience so that they can fly the coop, find other DMs. I just want to be that first rung on the ladder. I want to make sure their first sessions are solid.
What do we do here?
I have some tips to pass along about, how to do that. I can dig into any of these, but, I figure maybe touch on a few kind of high level things that then whatever you find interesting, Shelley, we can dig into more, but I've got a few ideas.
Okay, let's do it.
Well, so let's say that you want to start, right? If you want to start a group of absolute beginners where, maybe you got friends and family, though I encourage get strangers around the table because it's great to see strangers connect with each other. So let's say you want to get a group of people together, maybe friends, hopefully some strangers as well, or at least friends of friends, and you want to have an ongoing, game. So I have a few tips. One is to just really minimize the friction going in. The thing I hear again and again is people see D&D as this overwhelming thing. Maybe they've watched videos or they've heard about it. They've heard all the online talk. So they think this is not for me. It's way too complicated. And one of the things is just friction, that you have to tell them over and over again, I want you to not prepare. I want you to be assured you're not going to have a spotlight put on you. You don't need to be wearing funny clothes. You won't need to act. You won't need to think of your accent. And you have no obligation after this one show, after this one sort of intro event where you get a taste of D&D. I won't be hurt if you do not go on. It's not for everybody, though secretly we think it is for everybody. So that's one thing. Minimize the friction going in just to sort of create the top of the funnel as wide as possible in sales terms.
Well, I'm curious, I guess, how you handle characters for these brand new players. Are you giving them characters, or are you letting them create their own? Because that can also be very overwhelming.
I am, yeah. And that's exactly it. I myself give pre-generated characters, the ones from the starter kit, and I've got something to share. If I can share the screen, I'll show you what I do to those starter kits to avoid overwhelming people. Maybe I'll do a share while I talk, if that's all right.
Okay, I'd love that. All right, so for those of you who want to see this, you can watch this video on YouTube, on our D&D YouTube channel.
All right, can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, so this is what the out-of-the-box starter kit is for the fighter, which is the simplest class. And this is very well laid out. I think WotC has made it as Wizard of the Coast has made it as easy as possible for people to get into it. But I have seen people, again, I do absolute beginners, they have not rolled these funny looking dice before. That's the people I love to teach. That's where I want to spark that joy. They see this and they're like, oh, it gives that impression wow, this is complicated. So here's what I do. I go into the PDF editor and I just wipe out a bunch of stuff on the first page.
Oh my God.
I'll show you. You can sort of see my little screen. Already see my little screen as well as my big screen. So the first page, again, looks like this. And then if they flip the page, it's the same character. And every time they flip the page, there's more information revealed. So as they get over the overwhelming sense of the first page, some people start flipping right away. They're curious and they can handle it. And they'll read all the cool stuff on the main page. But I've seen people stick on this first page. I tell them, this first page is all you need for the very first session. Again, that material that I share on Patreon, you can actually eventually get my script. I'll be releasing that soon. We'll do like how to introduce D&D to a dozen people without sweating. So you can see that it's got, armor class, hit points. It only it doesn't even show your skills. I focus on attributes at first. And then, that's it. Basically their weapon. And look, that's easy. Anybody can handle this. And I don't see anybody get overwhelmed by that. Right. The second page looks like this, where now I've added in the skills. Only the ones they're trained in show up. Again, not that long list of skills. I start putting in if they're interested in the traits and the bonds and stuff, and more stuff comes in. And then eventually they're ready for, they turn the page one more time, and now they've got the thing from the starter kit. They're all color coded. So each class has got a different color. So I can say, I know you're a rogue by the color. Or I can say, you with the blue sheets, you rogues, maybe you should, take a look at this particular skill challenge.
You rogues.
So that's one way I do it.
So,
you rogues.
And in theory, so you said everything that they need for their first session is that very first character sheet that we...
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, if you get a hold of these materials, you might choose to use the second sheet which has the skills and some other stuff. But even that has only about half the text of the final sheet. And, I recommend that, again, to avoid that sort of sense of it being overwhelming for people. I've seen that have really good effects. This is one where I think it's so important to avoid any tiny bit of shame or impatience or mockery from players to each other, or for you as a DM to other people. Some people's barrier is they're actually quite socially anxious. And, like a Science Mike, who you had a while ago, talked a lot about sort of outside the neurotypical range. And some people, I think a higher than usual proportion of people that come to my table, they're dealing with somewhere on the autistic spectrum disorder, or they have social anxiety, and they self-identify. I'm not a clinician, so I'm not figuring this out for myself. And I think because you hear from Science Mike and these other studies, this is actually a great way for them to start to stretch themselves and start to take on, some real life skills. So it's really important to be welcoming, even if they're totally neurotypical. It's just nice to be really nice to people. It's nice to be very enthusiastic about their choices. So if they're expressing a different gender, if they're expressing a transgressive personality, if they're expressing someone that's got a kind of wild personality, it's really important to not have the tiniest bit of mocking them or shaming them or even being surprised that they chose that particular thing. And I think that vibe then, gets everybody to support each other. So that's something I can speak on at length, but that's kind of the short version of that particular thing. I take a teacher's approach to it. You recently had, I think it was V Muse, who talked about being a teacher and applying her curriculum. And she said, this is a lesson plan. I know how to do that. That was such a great moment. I really feel the same. So I'm a teacher, by some experience, not as much as game design, but I knew what it was like to build slides and build an agenda. And each lesson should layer on something else. Like each session, I say, I'm going to teach these 3 important basic concepts. And we're talking like, what's ranged combat like? Or what is it like dealing with a stealthy monster? And just have a few of these things. Okay, this battle is going to be all about taking saving throws instead of them hitting your AC. Let's teach that. And I just think of 2 or 3 things with each scene that I'm trying to get across and illustrate. And session by session, I have like a 12 session sort of first season, as I call it, where by the end, you've gone through all the basics. And it's just like making a lesson plan. So let each layer settle in and make sure people understand it, and walk over and point to their sheet and say, hey, here's the number you're looking for. Just really make sure you don't leave anybody behind. As long as you take it a bit at a time, anybody can learn this stuff. And then you've enabled them to go anywhere for any DM. That's a great feeling.
Well, how do you handle when you have these large groups of people? I mean, certainly you're going to have players that are going to like lots of different types of games. How do you appeal to a wide audience?
Yeah, it's hard. Of course, you only have so much time. And so I just try to cover the most likely hits. Like, okay, let's talk about interesting moral choices, combat, and what my character can do. Those might be 3 general areas that probably somebody likes one of those. And then you can hone in on each of those, maybe across the next few sessions. You can say, okay, I'm going to go one step deeper. What does it mean to know what my character can do? Well, what about the soft skills versus the combat skills? and immersion and story. Okay, I'm going to tell a story that intrigues them. And now I'm going to get into a story that gives them sort of big mental visions of what the world is like. So again, you can break down each of those areas on what they like the most. You can't cover it all in one session, but if you do a good enough job, hopefully they'll come back for sessions 2 and 3, and you keep stepping through those things.
Do you want to explain a little bit about your Patreon and where people can find it and all of the materials that they'll find there?
Yeah, thank you. So patreon.com is a site where creators can take little bits of money, as little as $1 a month, to distribute materials. I have stuff for free. So all of my sessions, just go to my Patreon page. If you go to Patreon, it's like patron, but with an E, patreon.com, and look for Rolling Rogues. So you can do /Rolling Rogues, all one word. You know how to spell rogue. You play D&D. So Rolling Rogues, plural. So once you go there, you'll see all of the sessions. So you'll be able to see. And if you want to learn D&D, if you're sitting there saying, oh, I've watched a lot of D&D, but I still don't quite know how the mechanics work. Remember, I start from the absolute beginning and I try to make it entertaining. And there's an interesting sort of story and universe. So you can go there. You'll see my introduction show. This last one that's posted is me with 48 people in the room, all rolling dice and getting through it.
It was like D&D school. It's so cute.
Yeah, it is. It feels that way. And I feel like a teacher doing it. It's an awesome feeling. Episode 2 is getting 10 people around the table, and now they're in jail and breaking themselves out, and they step through from there. So on patreon.com /Rolling Rogues, you can see all that stuff for free. Then you'll see there's some videos that can unlock, right? So even if $1 a month, the first thing that you unlock is my commentary, sort of reality show style. I don't dish the dirt. I just basically comment. That's right, exactly, into your lane, Shelley. So I comment on how that show went and what I thought of the player choices, and maybe drop a bit more lore in there and kind of connect things up. So you can say like, oh, Matt's mentioning this bit of lore they discovered. It must be important. So that's a nice little insider clue.
Nice.
And then with a little bit more, you can get to this level of videos where, again, where now as a DM, I open up my laptop, I show you my script, I show you my materials, and I step through, here's the session coming up, and here's how I'm preparing for it, and here's what I think will happen. And then on the next video, say, how did that go? What was the survey results, and what are the notes that I took, and what worked and what didn't, and how am I tweaking the process? So it shows me in the middle of my creative process, which I share. And then on top of that, I'll actually share the actual materials. So you'll be able to download materials where you'll get my introduction script. I believe just an open source. So this is a negative profit enterprise, right? I take donations, but money is not the problem here. I'll happily spend my own money to fill the gap. But the more that gets donated, I can do more shows on more stages, on bigger stages, give away more materials and books. So your donation doesn't just unlock these videos. It really helps an important enterprise where, helping get everybody spark the love of D&D. So you can really spread it far and wide. Yeah, Patreon is like that. But if that's not your thing, also on Twitter, frankly, I'm just going to point to Patreon and other things. But I'm Matthew M. Ford on Twitter. That's Matthew with 2 T's. That was back when I thought Twitter was a serious platform. I was like one of the first people on Twitter, and I thought, I'm going to have my real name. I'm going to use the same handle and everything, because that's the responsible thing to do. I could have done so many cool handles, but no, I'm Matthew M. Ford. So there I am on Twitter, and that shows links to all the other stuff as well. So please look me up, and I answer all patrons. So the great thing is, if you're a patron, even $1 a month, get into dialogue with me. I really want to hear what you think. That dollar is a great filter that you're serious enough that I really want to listen to your ideas. So that's a great way to collaborate as well.
You are very generous.
Oh, I love it.
Yes.
It's important. It's going to save the planet. We can save the world with D&D.
D&D
That's a whole other
is going
subject.
to save it. Yes. Get in on it. Start learning, start teaching, start dungeon mastering too.
Yes, right. Start DMing, start playing, get into that imaginary world. It's great in there.
It really is. It's better oftentimes than the real one.
Well, it certainly is easier on the planet as well. If we're spending a lot of our time, in the virtual world, imaginary and otherwise, that means that we're not tromping around, putting footprints all over the place. So get together around a table, have a glass of beer afterwards and talk about it, and simple pleasures. Go for it.
I know, right? It really is. For anyone who is listening and watching, if there's anything we talked about that you want us to dig into more when Matt returns as a guest, let me know. Let us know, because that will be a great way to find out what's resonating, what types of things people want to hear more about. So
definitely. So
share away.
Totally. Yeah. I love feedback. And I love hearing what we can do better. So hit me up.
Awesome. Thank you so very much for being here.
Great.
So
thank
early
you so
in the
much,
morning
Shelley, and
for
Greg
you
and everybody, producers. Yeah. Oh no, that's fine. Not a problem. It's a great way to start the day.
Awesome.